We are talking about human beings, and associate with the title. But keep in mind that the monetary system also allows here the development of many theories about such a topic, based on nothing, and, in addition to that, it doesn't educate people on such an important subject, even the most important. If you will seek an answer to this question on the internet, you will come across all sorts of theories and ideas about life after death, but sadly, all are just ideas, and here the monetary system makes a big mistake, because it isn't focusing on this important topic. In the first 10 Google searches, are only 2 scientific answers, the rest are religious and spiritual sites. And these scientific sites are on 4 and 5 position, and one of them requires a subscription for letting you read the article. And on the following pages, you will find even more sites that offer illusory, spiritual, and religious answers. Look, the pure truth about death, the truth discovered by science, until now. From roasted chicken, fried potatoes, Coca-Cola and food from McDonald's, everything that you eat transforms your body. That, plus the oxygen you breathe.
In digestion, food is changed by the organs into a soluble form to be absorbed by the body. Food in the mouth is mixed with saliva. Saliva begins to dissolve the food as the teeth grind and cut it. Food is forced back into the throat, pharynx, by the tongue. Food in the pharynx stimulates the swallowing reflex. The larynx is pulled upward to meet the epiglottis and seal off the trachea. Food goes from the pharynx to the esophagus. Food moves down the esophagus by peristalsis. The peristaltic wave reaches the esophageal sphincter and food enters the stomach. The unique muscular structure of the stomach breaks up the food into small pieces called chyme. Chyme exits through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum of the small intestine. The major portion of absorption and digestion occurs in the small intestine. The mucosa secrete enzymes that supplement the digestive enzymes of the pancreas and liver. This completes the chemical process of digestion. The walls are covered with villi where nutrient absorption takes place. The structure of each villus contains a capillary and lacteal to pick up the digested nutrients. The nutrients are now transported by the blood to all the cells of the body. The undigested food reaches the ileocecal valve and enters the large intestine or colon. The colon absorbs water, manufactures vitamins, produces mucus, and forms and expels feces. Mass peristalsis pushes the feces into the rectum, which stimulates the defecation reflex.
All cells need oxygen. It is the essential fuel which is necessary to enable cells to stay alive and to carry out their various activities. Bringing oxygen to the cells requires the uptake of oxygen from the air in the lungs, its transportation in the blood, and its delivery to cells all over the body. The first step is the taking up of oxygen by blood flowing through fine capillaries in the walls of the lungs' air sacs, or alveoli. The oxygen molecules change from their state as a gas freely circulating in the air, dissolving into a solution in the plasma within the capillaries of the alveoli. Once in the solution of the blood, 98% of this dissolved oxygen is taken up by passing red cells, leaving just 2% remaining in the physical solution unattached. Red cells are particularly well suited to transporting oxygen because they contain a special oxygen-binding protein known as hemoglobin. Each molecule of hemoglobin itself contains 4 molecules of heme, an iron-containing pigment, which binds oxygen loosely and reversibly. Hemoglobin that is fully saturated with oxygen is bright red and is called oxyhemoglobin. On the other hand, hemoglobin that is not saturated with oxygen is purplish blue in color and is called deoxyhemoglobin. It is heme which makes it possible for the red cells to pick up oxygen dissolved in the blood, transport it combined with hemoglobin, and release it back into the blood as oxygen in solution, ready for delivery to the various cells of the body. Hemoglobin gives up its oxygen as red cells travel through capillaries in tissues where there is a low content or partial pressure of oxygen. The partial pressure of oxygen represents the level of dissolved oxygen in plasma. As oxygen is released and again is carried in solution, the partial pressure of oxygen in the capillaries becomes greater than the partial pressure of oxygen in the surrounding tissues. This causes oxygen to move out of the capillaries into the tissues and to finally reach the cells. This graph, the oxygen dissociation curve of hemoglobin, shows why hemoglobin is particularly suited to its role in transporting oxygen. The oxygen dissociation curve demonstrates the relationship between the oxygen carried in combination with hemoglobin, the O2 saturation, and the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood. The sharp upstroke and the flat plateau illustrate how oxygen is released to the tissues over a wide range of conditions. Its shape means that although the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood returning from the lungs and being pumped out by the arteries may be reduced to only 50% of the normal value, say due to lung disease or high altitude, hemoglobin will still be 85% saturated with oxygen.
The same happens with the fetus that breathes and feeds through his mother. Now, to better understand, take this child and put him into a glass box, and give him food and oxygen until the age of 18. You'll notice how he is transforming miraculously. Basically, almost everything that you gave him is transforming into his body. This is how he looked before. This is how he will look after 18 years. This is what happens when you grow. Practically you are a transformation. But what happens when you die? Your perception about your own death cannot be verified because your brain will die, so we will focus on the observer, the scientific man, and what he's observing is decomposition. Worms will gain weight, the plants will grow, your body will turn into other elements of nature. That's the reality. Think about a man eaten by lions. What happens with his body? The same with a chicken eaten by you. It's just like any food. The human body will go into the structure and the development of lions. In fact, this form, the human being, dies, because everything is metamorphosing. Let's say that after death you will pass into another state, like energy for example. But for that theory to be true, that form of existence must be conscious by the human being. I mean, this form of energy to know that it was a human being. Otherwise, it is the nature transformation of which we spoke earlier. You perceive the world through the five senses. Another form of existence of you should perceive the world in the same way. It has to be conscious of the first form to be considered a continuation of the same being. Another idea is that of the soul. Let's highlight a few realities to see if this theory finds its place in reality. You are born without hands and legs, blind, and you are a faithful man who believes that after death the soul will rise to heaven. You got a problem with your heart, and it's being replaced with an artificial one.
The sound you hear is the total artificial heart. Both ventricles were removed along with 4 valves. Connector tubes were sewn in, and it pumps blood just like a human heart.
Still, you are aware of yourself like before. Nothing changed from that point of view. You have a problem with your blood and is replaced with artificial blood. That, plus your kidneys are being replaced too. You have smoked too much, and you must now replace your lungs with an artificial ones. The spleen is no longer needed, so it will be pulled out. Without hands and legs, and with artificial heart, kidneys, lungs, liver, and blood, you are still aware of yourself. To strengthen your constitution, you are replacing many of the bones of your body. Your sight is restored in a way or another.
Thanks to a new device, people can now locate objects when blindfolded. A headset with a camera scans the area and sends the images to a laptop. Software then transforms them into sounds that are played back through headphones. Objects generate different sounds depending on their size and position, so a user can accurately locate them. The system is helping blind people sense their surroundings.
Are being replaced almost all your organs and important parts of your body through technology. And despite all of this, you remain the same man with faith in God. The brain is the most valuable organ that it have left, but the bad luck follows you again and you have an accident that leaves you with half of the brain.
The right hemisphere of his brain is gone. Aha. Hod live? Or will he be able to function with half a brain? And how will this young man deal with such a horrible deformity? Plastic surgeon Dr. James Apesos is shocked. He has encountered difficult cases, but never anything like a Hod.
This was nothing I thought I could fix. I had to actually change the operation on the operating table several times because it wasn't what we expected.
Incredibly, over the next 14 years, Dr. Apesos performed numerous reconstructive surgeries on a Hod. Many attempts failed. At one point, due to complications, a Hod even slips into a coma. But despite it all, he never loses the will to live or his sense of humor.
You really coming for good.
Current technology is able to replace almost all the organs or body parts with artificial ones. It's just a matter of time before all will be replaced.
Looks good in S1. Roger. ACS arm switch is on. Okay, Victor. Landing rocket arm switch is on. Here comes the throttle. Circuit breakers in. We have separation. Roger. Inboard and outboard are on. We're coming forward with the side stick. Looks good. Roger. I've got a blowout. Vapor 3. Pitch your pitch to 0. Pitch is out. I can't hold altitude. Direction alpha is off. Trip selected. Emergency. Flight com. I can't hold it. She's breaking up. She's breaking.
Austin, astronaut, a man barely alive.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man. Steve Austin will be that man. Better than he was before. Better, stronger, faster.
Mostly with an artificial, mechanic, body, and with half a brain, our man is as aware of him and as faithful as before. Now, think about where is his soul, in the brain, in the remaining half of the brain. But what if he has a brain disease, for instance, Alzheimer's disease?
The healthy brain is made up of millions of interconnecting nerve cells called neurons. Neurons constantly communicate with each other by sending signals through tentacle-like connections called axons and dendrites. The brain of a patient with Alzheimer's disease is much different. The orderly, organized arrangement of nerve cells found in a healthy brain become entangled, full of senile plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. The plaques and tangles interfere with the normal activity between neurons in the area of the brain responsible for intellectual thought. Alzheimer's disease affects people in different ways. The disease is slowly progressive from onset. Memory loss, confusion, disorientation, and poor judgment are a few of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease.
Will his soul be affected by this disease too? Consider now the soul theory, or other theories that human beings continue their existence after death. But these theories, such as the soul or energy theory, are only assumptions and ideas. You must focus on what is real, or else you can contemplate thousands, billions of these theories, and you will only confuse yourself even more. Human being is part of the universe, is a transformation. Human being represents basically electric signals in their brains. Signals that can be changed, modified, or erased. That we know so far. To realize how far from reality are most human beings, let's see the following scenario. You wake up tomorrow in a building with 2 floors, 10 rooms. In the building, many objects, but also food. At first sight it's impossible to exit the building. You have a bomb attached to your left hand, an intelligent one, that will automatically inject a poison into the bloodstream, that will kill you instantly. Trying to cut your hand and stop blood flow from it, it triggers. Try to remove it from your hand, it triggers. On this bomb it's a timer that shows the fact that you have only 2 more days before it triggers. In the building are 100 people in the same situation as you. But you do not know their time left and neither they yours, and they don't consider too much the situation. Start. What are you doing? You walk through the building to see how it is. You get to know the people in the building. You look through the window. You see the landscapes and try to get out of the building. You write music, poems. Will you imagine how the building would look like if those people would live more than 2 days? Would it be the food enough for all? It would create crowding. Will you develop theories about the world after the bomb? What would you do? More than likely most people would try to defuse the bomb. Find ways not to die. Well, you are right in this position on how shocking this seems to you. You wake up tomorrow in a building with 2 floors, 10 rooms. In the building, many objects, but also food. At first sight it's impossible to exit the building. You have a bomb attached to your left hand, an intelligent one, that will automatically inject a poison into the bloodstream, that will kill you instantly. Trying to cut your hand and stop blood flow from it, it triggers. Try to remove it from your hand, it triggers. On this bomb it's a timer that shows the fact that you have only 2 more days before it triggers. In the building are 100 people in the same situation as you. But we do not know their time left and neither they yours, and they don't consider too much the situation. Start. What are you doing? You walk through the building to see how it is. You get to know the people in the building. You look through the window. You see the landscapes and try to get out of the building. You write music, poems. Will you imagine how the building would look like if those people would live more than 2 days? Would it be the food enough for all? It would create crowding. Will you develop theories about the world after the bomb? What would you do? The problem here is that you do not realize that, because of the long time between present and the bomb detonation. It's shocking, it's hilarious, it's amazing, and it's real. It is possible to realize it when you are approaching the deadline or when the clock suddenly changes its detonation time in a much shorter one. And it's very probable that, if you realize what actually death means, to begin enjoying life even more.
Mary Allen used to run the Royal Opera House. Now she spends most of her day gardening and trying to write a novel.
Oh no, I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, leave the house at 5:30, get to my desk at 6. Then I'd have 3 hours before anybody else turned up, when I could do my reading and my thinking and my writing. 9 o'clock through till 7, I had meetings. And then at 7 o'clock, I'd have to go out either to a performance or a dinner or some kind of function.
Did you get a chance to look at the flowers?
Occasionally, fleetingly, very, very fleetingly.
But on the whole, what were you mostly taken up with?
Just keeping the whole thing on the road. I remember in February '97 thinking, I can't carry on doing this much longer because I feel terribly empty. You know, what do I do with my life? I think about arts funding, arts politics, a bit of art if I'm lucky. I've got nothing else in my head, I've got nothing else I can talk about.
In 1999, Mary was diagnosed with breast cancer. She quit the high-flying career that had meant so much to her.
How did the thought of death change your values?
I think it makes you reassess everything almost instantly and overnight. I think one of the most important things to me was realising that through all those years when I'd been at the Arts Council and the Royal Opera House, I'd hoped that my friends would wait and wouldn't mind the fact that I wasn't spending too much time with them, but I'd always assumed that time, if not infinite, there was a reasonable amount of it. And that one of the most important things for me then was to just spend far more time and energy and make much more of a commitment to personal relationships. So that's my husband, my family, friendships.
And what started to matter less?
Oh, work. Work suddenly had the status of nothing but providing you with the money to live.
Whereas before, what had it been for you?
Oh, beforehand, I think it had been a means through which I could achieve all kinds of subsidiary objectives, like feeling good about myself, intellectual stimulus, in fact, all kinds of things that I could have provided for myself through other ways.
There is no purpose in life. That's a hard thing to accept. People, ego, think a fresco is here to help make the world a better place. Well, that's pleasing to me, but I don't buy that shit. I know that nature has no purpose. So they say we have eyes to see with. Now that makes sense to all normal people, which are completely fucked up. So whenever a scientist comes in my lab and says the purpose of eyes are to see, and I say, do you really believe that? He says, yeah. So I take him in a closet and close the door and say, see. He says, I can't see anything, put the light on. So you have eyes and you see if there's light, but you don't have eyes to see with. They think you have ears to hear with. No, you have ears and you hear. Some animals' ears turn in different directions toward the sound. Two farmers walking down the road. One of them says to the other, you hear about them Wright brothers trying to build a flying machine? The guy laughs, he spits. He says, if the good Lord wanted a man to fly, he'd have been born with wings. Well, if the good Lord wanted you to wear clothing, you'd have been born with a suit. If he wanted you to live in a house, you'd have been born in a house. So all that stupid stuff.
Because death is a result, the problem is actually the aging.
Aging is a complex but natural process that affects every molecule, every cell, every organ, and ultimately your entire body functions. And although chronological aging is inevitable, unfortunately, unlocking the secrets to biological aging has perhaps been the ultimate scientific quest for many years. Most recently, scientific research is focused on the way our cells age and how aging impacts their function, reproduction, and ultimately the lifespan of our cells. This may help us to better understand the causes and ultimately the potential solutions for key age-related diseases such as heart disease and cancer. We've all known people who look old for their age. Clearly there are genetic factors involved there, lifestyle factors, nutritional factors that all affect how we age. But now much is known about these cellular processes that incorporate these various factors and lead to people aging slowly or more quickly. The first way we age is due to DNA damage. Our DNA is under continuous assault from ionizing radiation, from toxins in the environment, and even as a result of just the normal processes of metabolism. And up to 1 million DNA damaging assaults occur every single day. And these can result in genetic typos or mistakes in the DNA replication. Now these mutations can accumulate over time, eventually causing cells to malfunction and even die prematurely. Our bodies, though, have repair mechanisms that take care of this DNA damage. However, defects in DNA repair seem to be directly related to the aging process. This critical balance between protecting the DNA from damage as well as repairing DNA is an ongoing area of active research. Another process that leads to aging as well as disease is the activation of genetic regulators, which are also known as transcription factors. These impact a multitude of metabolic processes in our bodies, including the dynamic balance between DNA damage and repair, also between energy production and decline, and control cell lifespan. Over time, the activity of these genetic regulators seems to decline and cumulative cell damage can occur. This cumulative damage contributes to age-related cellular deterioration and also contributes to many diseases of aging, including cancer, kidney failure, and even dementia. The third way that we age is related to cellular structures called mitochondria, which are the intracellular power plants that transform carbohydrates, fats, and proteins from the food that you eat into energy that your body can use. But free radicals are also generated in this process, which can lead to serious damage to your mitochondrial membrane as well as to DNA. This oxidative damage accumulates over time, leading to decreases in both the number of the mitochondria in our cells as well as their function, and can contribute to the development of many age-related diseases, including heart disease, arthritis, and Alzheimer's disease. As we age, our proteins and other structural molecules develop damaging crosslinks to one another through a process called glycation. Glucose molecules attach to proteins, forming what are called advanced glycation end products, also known as age proteins. The accumulation of these cross-linked damaged proteins are somewhat like plaque building up in your arteries, and they are tied to some of the most debilitating effects of aging. In fact, scientists are theorizing that these age proteins may play an important role in the development of atherosclerosis, as well as certain complications of diabetes and chronic kidney failure.
There are no really effective anti-aging medicines or pharmaceuticals available right now. The only things that really exist are things that may be of some benefit to people who are unusually susceptible to particular aspects of aging. People who, for example, might be coming down with type 2 diabetes in their 30s, or who might get heart disease in their 30s. That's unusually young, and if you are genetically susceptible so that might happen to you, then there are things that you can do that might stave that off and bring you closer to having an average age of onset of those problems, and therefore an average lifespan. But for people who have already, by default, got an average lifespan, let's say they're not going to die until the age of 80 or so, whatever happens, unless they get hit by a truck, then there really is nothing that can appreciably extend their lives. There are some misunderstandings in the popular press about the extent to which one's genetics affects one's longevity. And this is really because the comparisons that scientists make to put numbers on the importance of genes for longevity are not always well explained. So if we compare different human beings, then the typical number that people get is that about 25% of the difference between different people's longevity is explained by their genes. But in reality, virtually all of our longevity is determined by our genes, because it also explains the difference between our lifespan and the lifespan of mice or fruit flies or whatever. Ultimately, the reason they don't live so long is because they have different genes that have caused them to have a different body that ages less well and therefore ages more rapidly. At the moment, we have in the industrialized world an average lifespan that's something around twice what it was 100 or 120 years ago, which is a pretty respectable increase. And that's happened in two stages. In the first stage, from, let's say, 100 years ago until 50 years ago, most of the increase in average lifespan was due to very much fewer people dying in early life, especially in infancy. So, of course, if you measure average lifespan, what you're doing, you're including people who die at age 0. And there were an awful lot of people dying at age 0 100 or 150 years ago, and there are hardly any now in the industrialized world. But in the second phase, let's say in the past 50 years, that problem had already been solved, so we couldn't have any additional gain to speak of in our life expectancy. But life expectancy has carried on going up, and therefore it's done so by slowing down the rate at which people die at older ages. Now, the reason for that is a good deal less clear than the reason for the decline in infant mortality that happened first. Of course, the infant mortality just declined because we started to understand things like hygiene and antibiotics and vaccines. What's happened in the more recent period, we really don't absolutely know what's going on. There are various factors that could be involved, like, for example, the fact that people don't smoke quite so much. There are various interesting factors to do with prenatal life. In other words, to do with how well the baby was actually fed through the bloodstream of the mother when before birth. There seems to be a good deal of correlation there. But these are still open questions. Aging kills people, and by and large it kills people really, really horribly. Furthermore, it kills an unbelievable number of people, roughly 100,000 people a day worldwide. Overall in the world, roughly 150,000 people die each day, and about 2/3 of them die of age-related causes, of causes that young people more or less never die of. In the industrialized world, it's more like 90% of people that die of age-related causes. And as I say, most of them die really horribly. Aging is very bad for you. Now, that means that it's really bizarre that one should actually ask the question, why should we defy aging? Because we all know that we should defy cancer and atherosclerosis and Alzheimer's and diabetes and so on. And there's no argument about it. People appreciate that these things are bad ideas, bad things, and it's our medical and social duty and humanitarian duty to put serious effort into developing effective ways to defeat these problems. Now, aging is simply the sum of all of those things, plus a few things that we don't call diseases, like, for example, decline of immune function and loss of muscle mass and gain of fat mass. But still, the same applies. It's just the sum of all of these aspects of aging that we already don't like. It's unclear whether we will completely have brought aging under control in 50 years, but I think that if we get good funding, especially for the early work that needs to be done on mice in the next 10 years, then there's a very good chance that we will be there. And if we can describe that as eternal youth, I suppose the only problem is with the word eternal, because it sort of implies that we won't even be hit by trucks and so on. But certainly we will be able, once we reach that point, to fend off the decline in health and vigor and vitality that currently accompanies aging. We will always have the possibility of dying from old age, even when these therapies exist, just as today we have the possibility of dying of polio or tuberculosis. But we will not have the necessity to die of old age, because these therapies will be able to postpone the accumulating molecular and cellular damage of aging indefinitely, just in the same way that classic cars do not actually die at all. They don't have a mortality rate. The only time a classic car dies, so to speak, is when its owners stop looking after it. The role of the government in working on combating aging has so far been very slight. And I think this is no surprise, because at the moment there is, of course, still a great deal of ambivalence in society with regard to whether defeating aging or even combating aging would be a good thing. People on the one hand know how horrible aging is, but on the other hand they have had to live with it for so many millennia through the whole of civilization that we've come to have a degree of irrationality about aging. And so it's not obvious that there are really any votes in combating aging at the moment, in spending taxpayers' money on it. And for that reason, it's pretty tricky to get government to put serious money into it. At the moment, there are not nearly enough organisations out there supporting work to actually combat ageing. The foundation that I run, the Methuselah Foundation, of which I'm the chairman and the chief science officer, is probably the main one that's really focusing on the development of future therapies that will really combat ageing. There are, of course, plenty of studies going on around the world which are more indirectly focused on the eventual hopeful development of anti-aging therapies. Essentially all work within biogerontology, within the study of understanding aging, is with an eventual hope that that understanding will lead us to be able to develop future therapies. But that's a much more indirect approach than the approach that the Methuselah Foundation is taking. Then, of course, there are people who sell existing products that really don't work very well at all yet, and who are interested in improving the efficacy of those products by finding better ways to do things. So there are some companies, for example, trying to find analogues of resveratrol that work much better than resveratrol, and some people think that those things might be effective against human aging.
Remove as many factors that can endanger the lives of human beings, focusing on individual health, and then dealing with aging. In a system like the monetary system, neither a solution for aging can't help the species, because it will have a price, and those who will have access to it will be those with power in this society. Because there's a society based on profit, also, this solution will become a business. It's sad, but true, and do not forget that almost all the researches in this field are limited by the system itself, who is based on budgets. A progressive society, based on the evolution of the human race, would focus on education on human beings' information, a society where people would recognize themselves as equals in a society that must rely on planet resources and goods and services abundance. Such a society could create intelligent members, and the main occupation could be focusing on solving the aging problem, or educating human beings on the most important aspect of their existence. It's amazing how, for a species considered to be intelligent, its members don't face the main problem within species, death. Not only that they don't focus on the most important aspect within species, but the majority not even realize it. And then, why is considered an intelligent species?